Good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. So this morning, where are we? Where did we left off last time?
We were talking about like homosexuality.
Right. But we were talking about developmental stages, right?
Developmental stages.
Yeah, and we were looking at, let me do the screen, sorry. Let me share this screen. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think we had looked at the Freudian model, which is we looked at the oral, we'll look at the anal, we'll look at the phallic and latent, and the different age groups. And basically this gives you an idea of child development, the different developmental stages, for you to have an idea what your expectations are going to be as a parent. And so, or as a clinician working with children. And so this is basically Freud's schema, his developmental stages, but a more general stage that I think Erickson kind of prescribed this one, but I combine it with a lot of other ages. So even though it looks like Erickson, there are some other pieces that I combined in it. And so in this developmental stage, what you have infancy, birth to the first 2 years, and some of the issues here in terms of social attachment. And so, for example, like autism, you might be able to start identifying some of these areas early, such as autism, which is, this is where the child begin to form social attachment. And this, the child used with the hands, touching and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so this is the maturation, sensory, touch and feel, perception, all of those things are developing. Motor skills are developing. So those are some of the basic issues under that. Erickson, though, if you notice, I highlight what I highlight in red. That's where Erickson would sort of focus his developmental stages in terms of trust versus mistrust. So the child early begins to develop that bonding, that trusting phase. Now we have adults who are still stuck in this phase in the sense that they are paranoid, they're not able to trust anyone. However, that may not necessarily be as a result of developmental delay. It may also be that there are some neurological factors involved in terms of the frontal lobe damage that may have happened. And that may mean that the person, can be paranoid, can be paranoid. There's like a schizophrenic disorder, or a person can be delusional. So there may be some other neurological factors that are going, but this is basically talking about, the bonding process at this particular level. So you could see how it would be important for a child to be touched and not be left in the crib forever, because a child would then need that human contact to start developing some of these basic features, which comes from the stimulation from the touch, when you touch the child, okay? And then the toddler, which is basically from about ages 2 to about age 4. And then you have locomotions begins to develop. The child can now begin to engage in play and fantasy. Basically, the child can look at a toy and the sort of fantasy that they can develop at that particular point. However, this particular point is important in terms of creativity, your imagination, as opposed to concrete thinking. It's a more fluid where the child can so engage in play, maybe with a toy, whatever that might be. You may have seen children who still, at certain age, still have to have a blanket, something to touch, basically. So these are some of the things to remember. Also, Erickson, I should have highlighted that. One of the things that Erickson highlighted is in his schema is the whole idea of autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is beginning to develop, where the child begins to develop some sort of being able to play by themselves, being able to spend time, basically. So that's kind of Erickson's. So for example, on a test, you may be asked to identify a particular period with a particular age group. So that's how you may want to, start focusing on that. Then you have the early school age. The child start going to school at this particular primary school, elementary school, that is, at this particular age. And we see the sexual identification, group play, issues of self-esteem begins to develop. We have the Erickson portion, which is the highlight in red. That's the Erickson, how his schema would look. I just add some other things to that. Initiative versus guilt, okay? And then in the middle school age, which is the age 6 to 12, see that, age 6 to 12? This is a very troubling period for young children at the middle school age, like in the 8th grade, 7th grade. Some of the issues here begins to be friendship. They start forming groups, start hanging out together. This is a period too where high level of gossip normally happens at this particular place. Concrete operation, skills, learning, team play. They can work as a group. They can begin to learn to share. Erickson would categorize this as industry versus inferiority. In other words, where a child begins to, stand on his or her own, and then for them, there is this sense of there's a need for them to be accepted at this particular group. And so before, all of the others, kids kind of hang together, but at this particular age group, kids begin to separate themselves. And whether they separate themselves by color, by race, they could do that. By gender, they do that. But there are some bad elements in this, because kids can begin to discriminate against other children at this particular point. And so, like I've worked in a middle school, and I used to run different groups. And sometimes, I used to have one group where kids, some of the girls used to paint their hair, paint their hair all kinds of different colors, clothing becomes a real big issue at this particular point. Also, at this particular age too, though, you begin to see maybe gay tendencies among boys. Some of the boys, we have may hang out, find it more comfortable hanging out with the girls at this particular age group. If, you know, especially when you start seeing that gay tendencies. And they may even start, you know, in terms of the walk, you may start swing at this particular point, you know, the gay swing. You may start seeing some of that at this particular period. The difficulty with this, though, now in today's age, that you can't really begin to do an intervention in the public school system at this particular age. In other words, you can't bring a boy over and start talking about the gay and lesbian issue. You'll be terminated, because that would be a normal development according to the way society is here today. So the most you could do is beginning to provide services to help him to begin to adjust to that style, that gay style. Help him to understand that and to overcome that, to adjust, not to quit the behavior, but rather to begin to accept the behavior. And so that I guess the assumption is that he'll be able to give him the support, be able to deal with his peers who may want to laugh and make fun of him. And so that's kind of the intervention. However, the challenge would be different for, you know, for within the local congregation, because your intervention would have to be somewhat different on that. Any questions at all?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's the middle school. Also, in that particular age group, though, in terms of friendship, you know, it's really important that that the local congregation start providing this particular age group the material that they would need to start talking about sex, start talking about friendship, loyalty, you know, themes such as gossip, themes such as bullying. You know, these are themes that you have to begin to, you know, build classes around those kinds of topics that can help this particular age group to begin to deal with how they feel about themselves. Also, personality development comes in terms of some kids may be just shy. You know, some kids at this age may lack some of the social skills to interact with their peers. There may be issues of self-esteem where kids can be bullied. So you may have to begin to train kids at this age about bullying, you know, about how to respect each other, how to be part of a team, how to not violate the boundaries of others, to respect other people's views and stuff like that. So these are some of the early topics that you may want to discuss. Now, in the early adolescent phase, which would be run from about age 12 to 18, you actually have physical maturation. You know, girls, their breasts, they may start their period at this particular point. You know, boys also. So they are actually physically, their bodies are changing. And so this is an area where, again, you know, teachings and the class should be designed to begin to address some of these areas. Formal operation, emotional development, membership of peer groups begin to really take strong, you know, at this particular point. Again, this is where, you know, the gay and lesbian may start identify, you know, problems at this particular point. Because what happens, you know, they want to be a part of a group. They want to identify with a group at this point. And so this is where bullying can really get nasty. You know, name calling can get nasty. You know, for example, some students at this age may resent other students because they're poor. You know, in school, for example, it's in September when school just opened, some kids may have $100 sneakers, while another kid, it's kind of like, his sneaker is really, you could tell that he is from a poor family. And some kid may begin to feel shame about who they are, in comparison to other kids who are more affluent. They're able to have new clothing, they're able, I guess in the Caribbean, it may not be so much of an issue because students do wear uniforms. Am I correct in Jamaica?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, but in the US, where, you wear uniforms, you have jeans and all kinds of different stuff. So people, you get to see the wealth of certain students, certain families portrayed in the way the kids are dressed. But by token, those kids who are from poor families may not be able to, have that kind of material wealth to be able to display in terms of how they dress and what they wear. And so kids begin to feel isolated, and they may even begin to feel angry. So this is where you may have a lot of kids acting out how they feel. And during this age, a lot of kids, frequently get suspended from school. Some even their behavior becomes so aggressive that they may even be expelled from school. Because at this point, kids begin to act out how they're feeling. And so remember all of the resentment that they've had that they couldn't act out. Now they've become more of an adolescent. They feel like they're an adult, therefore they can act out. In the church, this is where, parents may start having problems with kids saying, no, I don't want to go to church, and start, rebelling at this particular age in terms of, adopting the family's values, their religious values. A lot of kids do join gangs at this particular age group because this is part of an issue of identity. Now, people want to identify themselves. In the high school here in the US, when I worked in the high school, a lot of kids start dropping their pants. Their pants start going low. They start seeing their underwear. Well, girls too. They said that girls who sometimes do that too. So the pants are all down their knees like a style. I can never quite wrap my head around kids, feel. It's like watching a kid on the basketball court with one hand holding up his pants and another hand trying to hold the basketball and throw the basketball, and running with one hand holding his pants up. So it's kind of, I used to say to the girls, if you want to know the level of a kid's IQ, their level of intelligence, look at how low the pants is. The lower the pants, the lower the IQ, okay? So unfortunately, there's a lot of grown men also who run around with their pants, so low, below their butt, and you can see the underwear. So that's supposedly, I guess it's a style, but a lot of those kinds of stuff start happening early. Luckily, a lot of kids in this age want to be tattooed, but their parents won't allow them to. So there are some behaviors, obviously, that parents won't allow, but part of the identity here becomes very critical. Kids want to be, they're searching for that identity. And so that's where they become victims to certain peer groups, victims to gang, bullying. Either they're the ones doing the bullying or they're the ones that are being bullied at this particular age group. Now, at this age group, one of the new challenge that is happening is that at this age group, a lot of boys may want to change their sex, and a lot of girls may want to change their sex. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And that's extremely difficult when a boy at this age, in high school decides that he no longer wants to be identified as a boy, but he wants to be identified as a girl. But the reverse is also true when a lot of those girls now need to be identified as boys. And dating is a really an issue here. So can you imagine what it would be for a girl at age 4 and 6, between that age group, who's been socializing with her friends, and then when she gets to ages 11, 12, well, actually in the early adolescent stage, where all of a sudden the girl now becomes a boy, but she is within the same school, with the same age group that she's always been with in elementary school, middle school. Now she's in high school. Now she's a boy. I mean, can you imagine what that is like among her peers who knew her? Because what happens is the first piece that happens is the changing of the name. When now Mary becomes John. Can you understand what that would mean? Growing up with someone, going to school every day, during all of those developmental stages, and Mary is now John. And not only is Mary now John, Mary has cut her hair to look like a John. And Mary may start, she used to wear earring and stuff like that. Also, Mary, because of her age, because of the age group, the surgery at this particular age, really insurance don't pay for it. So that means the parents would have to be wealthy enough to actually do the physical surgery. And then, and in terms of removing the breasts. So some families, if they have enough money to pay for it, can get the breast removed. So can you imagine the transformation? Here's another difficulty. The difficulty is that in the dating name, remember he, who was a she, now wants to date, but now she's trying to date within the same age group in the same school. So everybody knows her when she was a her. And now, can you imagine her trying to find a date within that same age group? And can you imagine the gossip? Can you imagine the fights that's happening? So generally, a lot of these girls who want to turn boys frequently get suspended because they have to fight. Because people are going to, especially in the cafeteria, during the lunchtime, nobody wants to sit with them. Nobody wants to hang with them. And definitely the boys are going to run from her now that she's a boy, because they don't want to be accused of being a gay person. So nobody wants to sit with them.
She'll have friends eventually.
Huh?
She's gonna have friends eventually that's like her, Or she'll probably find friends eventually a long time.
Yeah, sometimes you break up a little. Go ahead. I didn't understand what you said.
Yeah, she's gonna have friends eventually, or she'll probably find friends eventually.
Well, what happens though is that you have to understand that kind of a alienation. When you remember in the elementary school, she had all of her friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the early age group of 4 to 6, she have the same friends. And in the middle school, between ages 6 and 12, she still have the same friends, all girls hanging out together. So by the time she get up to the next level, you follow, she's changing. So in the cafeteria, now she wants to hang with which group? She wants to hang with because she now is a he. Now he wants to now hang with the boys. The boys are running from her. And the girls are no longer comfortable being around. You follow? So he finds himself alone, or he has to fight because now he's angry. So he has to always defend himself. Then he starts, maybe bringing a knife because he has to protect himself. He's been suspended. But also what happens is psychologically, he's getting depressed because now he's being isolated. Nobody hates him. His world is completely changing. That's what's happening. His world is changing. And so the adults are trying to be supportive to him, but he doesn't want the adult. What he wants are his age group to accept him, but they will never accept him. So he finds himself in a place that he doesn't want to be. So two things are happening. Physically, he's going to have to fight. And emotionally, most of these kids have problems. And so, one of the, like I said, I worked in the school, and one of the problems that I've had, because I used to do, the counseling for kids, and I'm a counselor. And what happens is we had, the smart board. One day we had the smart board. Well, we had smart board, and the teacher pull up attendance, and attendance comes up on the screen. And this girl, who's now a boy, when it comes up on the screen, her name doesn't change on the screen because the name on the birth certificate is a female name. So now on the screen, not only when all the students come up on the screen, his is coming up, but it's coming up as a girl. However, everybody in the building are forced to refer to him by his boy name, like John, right? But on the screen, it says girl. And it would always say girl, because when they register him, he was registered as a girl. So the name is still showing up on the screen. Sometimes the teacher slip up when they're taking attendance because they're looking at the record of the registration when they're calling, and they say, John, Mary, you here? Mary say, yeah, present. Joe, yeah, present, because they're doing attendance. Sometimes the teacher makes the mistake and use the registered name, which is the female name. And that creates an entire problem for the rest of the day for that particular student. Because one, students are laughing at him and they're telling you, hey, it's you. In fact, they want to shame him. So they're pointing him out. And then he's either going to take his book and throw it at the teacher or throw it at one of the students. Next thing you know, he gets 5 days of suspension. That happens frequently in the actual world of where kids are socializing. So the question then, what happens if this youngster is part of the congregation that you're worshiping? What happens? Or what happens if this youngster, you have your daughter who is of the same age group, they used to hang out together, right? During all those different age groups. Now they want to come over and hang over. They want to sleep over. What happens? Would you want your daughter, would you welcome this child who is now a boy, a girl who's now a boy, to come over and sleep over with your daughter? Because you know what sleepover means, right? They hang out together. So you see the problem here that you're going to have. Part of the problem you're going to have is that people are going to judge you as a Christian, that you're not fair. How can you be discriminating and not inviting, your daughter hang out with this kid the whole night, they play together. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, man, I'm just saying yes.
So that's going to be a real problem. So what will happen is chances are this youngster may stop going to church because she can no longer, or he, I should say, can no longer hang out with the same age group in the church, because parents, if they know this, they're going to try to protect their children. And so now he's going to have problems at school. He's going to have problems in the community. He's going to have problems at the local church. So when someone tells you that these kids are healthy individuals, they're lying to you. How can you be healthy? How can you be happy? You're troubled. One of these youngsters get early hooked up with drugs, either prescription drugs or illegal drugs, because they're so unhappy. They're self-medicating in order just to survive. And also it's very difficult, because then what happens is they wind up with same-sex people, you know, because, well, they're not, I shouldn't say same sex, because if you're a girl and you switch to a boy, you know, what girl do you think would want to go out with this girl who now changed to a boy, and you grew up together, know each other? Do you think it'd be easy for him to get a date? So he's been discriminated against. The issue would be whether or not that kind of discrimination is morally okay. That's going to be the issue for the religious community. Am I doing the right thing if I try to protect my daughter from this thing? Because at this point, you know, how do you practice, you know, your Christianity at this particular point? Would you be doing the right thing by trying to protect your daughter from this? Well, I don't know. You see how difficult it is even for me to identify. So maybe it might be the more correct, you know, because how do you describe them? When do you invite them, come on in, Johnny, or come on in, Mary? Which one do you use? And if you recognize him as John, is that a violation of your religious views? Because we were created in the image of God, we were created either male or female. So how do you as an it, how do you do this? And if they're attending Sunday school and, you know, you're taking, and he raises his hand, do you say, okay, Mary, your turn, go ahead? Or do you say, okay, John, your turn, go ahead? What name would you use in a Bible school class?
Oh, where is this, sir?
I'm asking what name would you use in a Bible? She raised her hand for a question and you want to respond. Would you say, go ahead, Mary? Would you say, go ahead, John?
If they're
You're teaching a class.
going to do with the homosexuality.
No, I'm just saying that this is a student in your class, a Bible school class,
Mm-hmm.
who you know as Mary,
Yeah.
that is now become John. They change their name. They're now posing as a male. And you know them and they raise their hand. Do you say, which name do you use? Do you use the one that you know them as Mary, or do you use the one that they say that they are now as John?
Tough. I probably would say that go ahead.
Oh, so you would avoid, you would be politically correct.
I would never get said sister or brother.
Okay, so you would try to be politically correct by not using any name. You try to avoid that.
Can't use any name. I can just say like go ahead. Or maybe that
Okay.
would be disrespectful, I don't know.
So what I'm saying is you would take a correctly political stance by doing not creating. When I do my notes, because I have a lot of these people on my caseload, so when I do my notes, you know, I say, instead of say he or she, I just say inmate. So I use that term, inmate, because they are inmates, basically, right? So I can use that term. But what happens when when you're conversing, when you're talking? Because remember, I'm looking at the computer, and the computer says, like, say, Mary, right? But in a social, but it's John. So now that what do you do? What do you say? Like, they walk in and say, good morning, Dr. Davis, how you doing? I say, good morning. Sometimes I do slip up, though. Sometimes I do slip up and use the name that's on the screen in front of me. You know, because that's the difficulty. So now they're training us to use the different, how to use the different pronouns. So one of the ways we have to ask, how would you like to be described? And then they will tell us. But even when they tell me, I don't use that. I still use the term inmate, because they're all inmate. So, so it can't be a problem. But when I write, I may have to put, the name, the correct name that's on the record. Okay. So, but those are some of the challenges, though, that you have to think about when you are working within the church itself in terms of teaching classes. You have to have a sense of all of that, because you can easily offend a parent. And the question is, how do you deal with that when that happens? So that's for the early adolescent. And then the late adolescent, autonomy in relationships, parents, dating becomes an issue. Parents, you have to knock on the door before you can go into their bedrooms. Those kinds of issues become a real big fight at home. Massive fights at home. The sexual identity issue again comes up, because now not only can they, have those homosexual traits, now they can advocate for themselves. And so, it becomes a real problem at this particular point. So intimacy versus isolation. This is, for example, you have your son at this age, and he wants to bring home his boyfriend. Go ahead.
Oh, the time of year.
Okay, but start thinking about the late adolescent. Please think about that, and especially with the dating and so on. Okay, so see you all next week.
Okay, yes, sir.
It's not time for chapter. I thought it